Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you today about Satya, or truthfulness. Satya is the Sanskrit word for truthfulness. Satya is the second of the Yamas that are spoken about in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. If you're curious and you want more information, here's the book. Check out Book 2, Sutra 29, and they'll start to talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. The Yamas are the first limb, and there are 5 Yamas. Ahimsa, non-harming; Satya, truthfulness; Asteya, respecting boundaries; Brahmacharya, countenance or moderation; and Aparigraha, sharing your abundance and not hoarding what you have. So back to Satya. Satya is a tricky yama to practice because on the level of duality, or on the level of personal I, if that is where we identify, there are no absolute truths on that level because our truth comes from our own unique perspective point. And from that perspective point, truth is relative. So each of us have inherited genetic predispositions. We have mental and emotional conditioning that we have gained through our human experiences in this lifetime that have gotten us to the point where we are now. And so our truth now could even be different than our truth 10 years ago, than our truth 20 years ago, and if we're old enough, our truth even further back than that. So our truth changes, and on the level of duality, it's wiser not to think in terms of the truth. Because if we take position of I am speaking the truth, then the other person will be in the position of not speaking truth. And really, we're each just speaking our truth as we understand it from our own upbringing and our own conditioning. So when we make a commitment to practice Satya, first start with the intention to speak your truth authentically as often as possible. There is a small caveat. Remember I talked about ahimsa. And ahimsa is the first of the yamas, and ahimsa means non-harming. And ahimsa is such an important and meaningful yama that all the other yamas and then the 5 niyamas are measured against ahimsa. So in each one we say, can I speak my truth in a non-harming way? So luckily, in this day and age, we have wonderful tools like nonviolent communication. We have people that can help us learn to speak our truths authentically and kindly. And that is the highest form of Satya on the level of duality, is to be able to speak our authentic truth in our own voice with kindness and compassion as we are sharing that with others. Now, when I was growing up in a yogic family and in a yogic community, my parents had a quote on the wall in our house that said, speech should bring tranquility, be truthful, pleasant, and beneficial. So remember, as you're committing to a practice of Satya, truthfulness is not enough. Even speaking your truth is not enough. You want that truth to be beneficial, to help others, and to raise the vibration, to bring tranquility, to elevate those that you're speaking to. So those are the qualities of your truth that you're trying to achieve on the level of duality as you start to adopt a practice of Satya. And that when you're adopting a practice of Satya or any of the yamas and niyamas, you can try it for an hour and see how it goes. Try it for a day and see how easy or difficult that is for you. Try it for a week. a month, and if you're lucky, adhere to that practice for the rest of your life. Have a commitment to follow the Yamas and Niyamas as a practice for the rest of your life. But back to Satya. So be sure that as you're speaking your truth, that you're being as kind as possible. So it's not only important to speak our truth to others, but it's also important in terms of Satya to be self-reflective and to be able to speak our truth to ourselves, or be able to self-analyze and self-reflect in an honest way. Sometimes that is not easy, because we have our subconscious and our unconscious, our shadow side that we have sublimated from our childhood, that is hidden to us often. And when that happens, it is incredibly useful to have spiritual buddies, spiritual partners, and spiritual friends who we can go to in times of need and who will honestly reflect back to us with loving kindness areas where we could really work on our personal I, our individual self, so that we can be the best version of our human self that we can be. Now, if you're going to adopt some spiritual buddies or make some commitments with friends to be your spiritual buddies, I would suggest that you only have 2 or maybe 3 spiritual buddies. If you go with more than that, the information or feedback that you're receiving or advice that you're receiving might be confusing and can often be conflicting. So limit your spiritual buddies to 2 or 3. And the criteria that you're looking for is you're looking for people who love you, who you know love you, truly love you, and people who have the courage to speak truthfully to you and to give you difficult information that might be hard to hear, for you to hear. Because you need your spiritual buddies for your blind spots. And so you may not even be able to hear them if they tell you once, twice, 3 times, maybe even more, the same information, because it's an area of ourselves on the level of the personal I or the personal self that we can't see. So be patient with your spiritual buddies. Select them carefully. Don't rotate them just because they gave you some difficult information. Try to stick with some really solid companions on your spiritual path so that you can grow and be the best human being that you possibly can be on that level. So back to Satya. Satya fits into the category of vritti that would be in the category of right knowledge. If you remember the categories that Patanjali spoke about in Book 1 in terms of the different possible combinations or categories of thoughts and emotions that can arise in your mind or body, they are right knowledge, misconception, verbal delusion, sleep, so deep dreamless sleep, so a blank, and then memory. And memory is everything prior to this moment. So Satya, if you are adhering to a practice of Satya, it would fit into that category of vritti, or thought or feeling, of right knowledge, right? That's the category that you're going for. Occasionally, we slip up and we convey some information that is not accurate. And that's okay. Remember, it's the intention of being truthful. We're human. We're going to do things and say things that are not in total alignment with our intentions in the moment. And we can sometimes look back and reflect on what we said or what we did and realize, oh, I didn't really mean to say that, or I didn't mean to say it that way. And that's okay. We're human beings. We're not meant to be perfect on the level of duality or personal I. So Satya, in terms of right knowledge, is a perspective point that you're sharing, and it can change over time because everything on the level of duality or personal I changes. It has opposites. Everything that we are experiencing, whether it's sight, touch, taste, smell, hearing, any somatic experience is going to change over time. So truthfulness is relative on that level. Then we can talk about Satya in terms of vidya or knowledge. And that is in relationship with the kleshas that are mentioned in Book 2 of Patanjali's. And the kleshas are avidya or ignorance, asmita or egoism, raga, attachment, dvesha, aversion, and abhinavesha, which is fear of non-existence or death, which is the root of all fear. So abhinavesha you can just call fear or terror, whatever you prefer. Satya in terms of avidya, the first of the kleshas, and the kleshas are the roots and that cause the thoughts or the vrittis, the thoughts and emotions, to arise out of them. Those are the core beliefs deep in our biology, in our neurobiology, that allow these thoughts and feelings to arise. So when you talk about Satya in terms of the klesha avidya or ignorance, we're talking about the universal truths. Truths that, like I believe, we are all the light of consciousness. I believe that we are all the same pure I am. We are the pure witness. We are the seer. We are the neutral observer. We are universal love. We are peace that is beyond disturbance. That's who we are in form. So that is the purest manifestation of who we really are. The story of our lives, the sense of separate self that we have created, is something that we have been conditioned to believe in our minds. Up until the age of about 2, most human babies don't really have much of a sense of separate self. They kind of don't know who they are, and they don't know who you are. And over time, they start to develop a sense of self through conditioning, through their parents, their family, their environment. They start to identify as the vehicle, the body that they're in, and they start to recognize themselves in mirrors. They start to identify with the name that you call them, that you have given them, and they start to look when you say their name. And that varies at different points where children start to create a sense of their separate self. But that is not how we were born. We were born the pure divine light of consciousness, and that's who we really are. And through all these labels and all these levels of identification, we have created a sense of separate self, which evolves out of avidya, ignorance. That sense of separate self in Eastern philosophy is ego, that belief that we are a separate self. So when you're talking about Satya in those terms, any time that you are sharing about higher truths, using your own unique language, the words that suit you, then you are elevating to a truth that is more universal, that we share together. Like, raise your hand right now as you're listening to this talk if you are aware that you're watching a video of me speaking right now. So raise your hand if you're aware. That awareness is the same in all of us. It's universal. Some of the neuroscientists call it unitive consciousness. So we are that. That is the truth of who we are. And when we talk about these elevated ideas of being the light of consciousness, pure awareness, that truth is different than the truth that we speak from our perspective point on the level of duality. Now, there is another truth that cannot be spoken about. And the only thing that we can say about that is there is an unknown absolute. Sometimes they call it the field of quantum potential, the scientists, but that field of quantum potential, that unknown, unmanifest, is the source of all that is, including that light of consciousness, or that beingness, that isness, that sense of I am. So everything comes from an unknown potential, and it can't be known by the mind. And that is why it requires faith. Whether you're having faith in quantum mechanics or science, whether you're having faith in your faith tradition and the scriptures that you are raised on, whether you're having faith in a modern teacher who's conveying the same truths, then having that faith is another form of Satya, which is not expressed through words. So regardless of where your level of identification is, whether you're identifying as the personal I, identifying as the unitive consciousness, the pure I am, or your consciousness now identifies as all, nothing, everything, and all combinations, that quantum quality of unknown potential. Regardless, just be honest with yourself and others about where you are and how you're feeling and your level of understanding and awareness at that time. So I hope that you are able to commit to a practice of Satya, if even just for a moment or an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, the rest of your life. I wish you all much joy, and I'll end with a short prayer. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May the entire creation be filled with peace and joy, love and light.